morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where over the past few days there hasn't been a lot of movie news. And I believe that's because the Marvel Sony Spider-Man announcement sucked all the air out of the room. Yes, I think that announcement was so big it scared the other studios, and they decided to give that announcement some breathing room lest it overshadow their own planned big announcements. Now, you probably didn't notice the lack of movie news for two reasons. One, you've been talking about the Sony Marvel Spider-Man deal. And two, so many trailers have been dropping. I'm sure you noticed that we've had an unusual number of trailers hit the internet in the past, let's say, 48 hours. And that's because we're heading into an unusually strong movie weekend. It is a holiday movie weekend, thanks to Valentine's Day. It's a 4-day weekend, thanks to President's Day. And because of that, two big movies are debuting, 50 Shades of Grey and Kingsman: The Secret Service. Now, those are not only hotly anticipated movies, but they have two very different target demographics. So you have a lot of different kinds of people going to the movie. So you have trailers to appeal to both groups. And it's actually kind of fun to figure out which trailers will be debuting with which film. For instance, Hitman Agent 47 and The Man from U.N.C.L.E. are going in front of Kingsman, while Aloha, Trainwreck, and Hot Pursuit are going in front of 50 Shades of Grey. So I was really kind of nervous with this lack of movie news about what I was going to cover on Morning Movie News today. But then, luckily, one of you, BTT viewer Jay Vallis, tweeted me a story about Frozen coming to Broadway, some more details. And that gave me some inspiration to throw together what I think actually makes for a very interesting and unique episode. Because while it's fun to talk about the big announcements, of course, it's also nice to take a breather and to look at the industry from a different perspective. So what's today's perspective? Well, for most of the episode, we're going to be focusing on the Disney empire. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, that sounds like business as usual to me. What are you talking about, unique? Well, I said it was a unique perspective. And what I want to discuss today is how Disney is able to, thanks to their very expansive empire, not just in terms of the properties they have, but the way they're able to promote those properties, they actually have an incredible amount of goodwill with fans. And that's because they're able to create great fan experiences. And we're talking beyond the theme parks and beyond the Disney store even, to other ways that they can get these properties out of there and allow fans and viewers, fans are viewers, to experience their favorite brands outside of the movie theater or the small screen. And I think that's incredibly vital. And we're seeing some other studios try to imitate that. We'll discuss that as well today. But I think nobody does it like Disney, as we're about to discuss. Now, again, as I said, that first story was about Frozen coming to Broadway. No other studio has as strong a theatrical presence as Disney. They have their own Disney theatrical division. It's obviously very successful. I think the Lion King did a lot to not only kickstart it with audiences, but also with critical praise. That was so highly regarded that, Disney suddenly became not just a player in the theatrical market box office wise, but also in terms of critical success. So I think that they have yet to recapture the magic of The Lion King with another adaptation, but I'm sure Frozen will be a huge box office sensation. And we're going to talk about how it's coming together today, as this article discussed that Jay Vallis sent to me. So we finally, looks like we're circling in on a date, and that's that it will hit the Great White Way in 2017. That's pretty far away, but if you stick with me, I think that's actually for a pretty good reason. So one of the great things about the Frozen Broadway experience, the way it's coming together, is that it's utilizing so much talent from the film. Jennifer Lee is writing the book, that's theater talk for the script, and then also Robert Lopez and Kristen Anderson-Lopez, who came from Broadway, are doing new songs. Of course, it'll be your old favorites, but you're going to have new songs part of this package as well. Now, they also have a director that they've brought on, Alex Timbers. Now, I'm not a big theater person, but I have a familiarity with it, and I actually have a direct familiarity with Alex Timbers' work. I saw Peter in the Starcatcher, which he directed. I thought it was pretty good, but I'll talk about my problem with it in a moment. But just to give you his resume, Timbers also directed Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson, which was very well received, the Pee Wee Herman Show when that came to Broadway, and of course the recent Rocky, which was not very well received at all. That was supposed to be something for men to see on Broadway. It did not quite work out. But the reason I have some concern about Alex Timbers is that both Peter and the Starcatcher and Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson, and even I think to some degree Rocky, save for that really interesting and ornate set piece at the end with the match, he has very minimalist sets. And I don't think that would be a good idea for Frozen. I think that Frozen is going to be a big moneymaker. It's going to be a big event for a lot of fans, both theatrical and just Disney animation, and just maybe Frozen fans who maybe haven't experienced the others before. But I think that because it's going to be such a big event, it should feel like an event. And if you have just like abstract ice sculptures or like Norwegian patterns up there, I think it's going to be really disappointing. And we'll see more like a Broadway stage show than this really amazing theatrical production that's worth, pretty pricey tickets. So Alex Timbers is maybe somebody that I would be a little nervous to have direct, although from a critical standpoint, with that background, I think that gives Disney a little bit of safety in terms of the reviews. I mean, it would be hard, I guess Rocky is actually, although I think the reviewers, as I recall, for that were tried to be kind, but with Peter and the Starcatcher and Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson, I think Alex Timbers has still probably a little bit of credibility left, at least post Rocky, with the theater circle. But then here's what I wanted to discuss and ask you. I think that because they're putting it out in 2017, that gives them enough advance notice to try and line up, I believe, the original cast. Because think about it, the voice actors in Frozen, almost all of them actually, except for Kristen Bell, have a Broadway background. You have Idina Menzel, of course, from Wicked, Jonathan Groff from Spring Awakening, Josh Gad from the Book of Mormon, also Hans, I forget the name of the actor, I didn't even think of him when I was putting together my notes for this story, but I do recall that he was in Cinderella as Prince Charming on Broadway as well recently. That's where Disney found him actually to voice the role. And I think Kristen Bell, even though she doesn't have any Broadway experience, would be able to do just fine. I think she's a very fun actress, and she might have to work a little bit to train herself to handle such a grueling routine, but I think she could do it for a short run, and I think that's all they would be able to get this group together for. But if I were Disney Theatrical, I'd be like, man, it would sell a lot of tickets and really make a big splash if I could get all these voice actors together to perform their roles live on stage. That would be amazing, even if they could do it for like a month, or let's say the holiday season. That would be generally October through, like, let's say the end of December. I think that would just make for record-breaking ticket sales and really a must-see ticket, even something I'd be tempted to see. So I'm curious, what do you think? Is Frozen on Broadway just enough for you, or would you really feel it would be a dream come true if they could get that voice cast up there? Do you think they should spend the money to make that happen? And then also, what do you think of this way to expand the Frozen brand? Do you think this is a good idea, or do you think that Disney Theatrical, as I said, since they haven't lived up to the job they did with The Lion King, that at this point these really are just glorified stage shows, and Frozen maybe deserves a little bit better? All right, so that's the first story of the day, and one way that Disney is able to put their brands out there, their properties, in unique and interesting ways. Now, the other way is, of course, their planned activities, and that's a big umbrella for them these days. Of course, primarily there's the theme parks, but I'm going to talk about their cruise line, because they're introducing Star Wars Day at Sea starting in 2016, right after the Star Wars 7 movie comes out. Excellent timing, Disney. All right, so what is this going to entail? Well, if you take one of their cruises, it's only going to be on one of their ships in particular, but it'll be for a couple of months in 2016. You will be able to have, well, let me first go through there's a real kicker here, which is awesome, but let me go through the more generic stuff. There's a Jedi Training Academy, meet and greets, with, costume characters, a nightclub done up like the Cantina, screenings of Star Wars movies and Star Wars Rebels, their new animated series, a deck party, and then also special merchandise, which is always a good way to hook fans, and then also, food and beverages that are Star Wars themed. But then also they're going to invite Star Wars celebrities to come along on these Star Wars Days at Sea, and it will be, I'm sure, some actors, also probably some of those involved behind the scenes, to sign autographs and also just interact with Star Wars fans through discussions and lectures. And I think that's actually a really good idea. I think that sounds great. I actually think the whole thing is a good idea. Some of you might be thinking, man, Disney just Disneyfies everything. That sounds so hokey. But I ask you to reconsider, and I'm going to share a recent experience with you. I recently was traveling, and I spent a day in Disneyland because a friend of mine was running their new one of their new Star Wars races. She was running in particular the 10K. So I got the chance to experience the 10K because she didn't remember she was running it when I planned my trip. So even though it was too late for me to sign up because it sold out, I totally would have done it if I could, I got to kind of experience the event and go around to the expo that they have for the runners, etc., and see all the fun stuff that was up, and everybody enjoying the event. It was actually really great, and that's what I want to discuss with you. That Disney was able to give a great experience to Star Wars fans. They did a really great job creating this event. There was great signage and great special merchandise. They did a wonderful job. Like, for instance, when the race started, they had the light speed graphic come up, and you were then supposed to go at light speed. Oh, I'm such a fan of this stuff. I'm sorry, I get a little choked up just thinking about it. I'm a real sucker for hype, and we're gonna actually talk about that in the viewer question today. But just the idea of it is just so wonderful, and it brings out such emotions to be able to experience something like that. And I thought to myself, how wonderful to do that for Star Wars fans. And also, I got to see the kids race as well, which is in the late morning after the 10K, and it was so great. It's like a little short race. It's like a mile maybe. And it's for like kids like 12 and under or something. And to see all these kids, they let them go in waves, running like full force because they're just having such a great time. And some of them were dressed up, and their parents were dressed up. And then Disney had these wonderful, actors, cast members they call them, of course, dressed up as Jedi Knights. And they did a really good job also with diversity. You saw a lot of different people, types of people playing Jedi Knights. There was this one African-American cast member who looked particularly cool. I saw him, of course, walking across. It was like a cleared area, and he just really caught my eye because his Jedi cape was billowing in the wind, and I was like, that guy not only looks really awesome, but how great is that for so many kids to get to see that and experience that, and to have that Jedi Master walk up to them. It was truly a wonderful experience. And I actually, by the way, if you want to run, and it's really a good way to introduce health into your lifestyle, the Disney races on both coasts, Disney World and Disneyland, are exceptional events. I can't recommend them highly enough, and they have many of them during the year. I actually only can run the 5K. I've done it twice so far. It's really great, but the 10K is pretty intense, but they have different levels so that you can go do like 5K, 10K, half marathon, full marathon, etc. So it's a really great event. So I thought that was wonderful they did that for Star Wars fans, and I think this Disney Day at Sea could be something at the same level. And so I think this is one of the reasons that Disney has so much goodwill with fans, and why people haven't, been upset about them acquiring so many properties. Because I think it's almost like being drafted into the big leagues at this point. When Disney purchases you, your fan base knows that their experience is going to just instantly get better. They're going to be able to have such a much better time experiencing the properties that they love in a way that no other studio right now can deliver. And by the way, if you are a Marvel fan, for instance, they do have a Marvel race weekend as well. I believe that's in November, also at Disneyland. All right, so let's segue into DC, and I think that it's important to note that Warner Brothers is the studio that I think is closest to achieving what Disney has done so far. And I'm talking about, of course, their Harry Potter property. They have the wonderful Wizarding World of Harry Potter at the Universal theme parks. The expansion, by the way, of Diagon Alley at Universal Studios Orlando is spectacular. It is an amazing experience. I've done that as well. But then also they have the Harry Potter studio tour in the UK, and they've really done a nice job also expanding the fan experience with that property in particular. And Universal, I think, really should run with this. You're going to have the Avatar experience at Animal Kingdom. That's also coming up. But, of course, I think the Jurassic World, hopefully we'll see that reflected in the Universal theme parks. But then also it makes me wonder, considering what Warner Brothers was able to do with Harry Potter, would you like to see them do that with their DC properties? Would you like to see that kind of immersive experience also created perhaps at Universal Studios? I think Universal would certainly be game. I'm reading more and more people are going down to Orlando to stay specifically at the Universal Resort. Usually you stay at Disney and you do a day at Universal. But now you have people taking entire Universal vacations, not only thanks to Harry Potter, but also properties like Despicable Me, which is there. And then also, I'm sure they're going to be adding things as fast as they can make the deals. Don't be surprised if the Hunger Games shows up at Universal. So DC, I'm just curious, I'd also like to hear down below if you think that you would like to see this kind of outside theater experiences applied to that world. So we do have some DC movie news for you today. DC fans are very patient with all the Marvel news all the time, but DC's got to get these stories out there. But I'm sure that things will pick up for them considerably once Batman v Superman comes out. But anyway, Dwayne Johnson, aka The Rock, is doing a lot of press right now for Furious 7 and San Andreas. And so also, of course, he's talking Shazam. One of the tricks to these interviews is, you ask about the movie that's currently going on, but then you have to ask about a movie in the far future. Some celebrities, some actors get upset about it. They're like, oh, come on, only ask me about the movie we're currently talking about, but they don't understand the game, which we'll also talk about a little bit in the viewer question. So that's just basically a little background on interviewing there. But anyway, he's been talking a lot about Shazam because people have been asking him about it. And Dwayne Johnson, I think, understands the way the game is played, in terms of publicity for movies, so he's happy to talk about it. So what has he revealed? Well, he's really focusing on Black Adam as an anti-hero, and I think he's really trying to underscore that that's the end game for that character. I think he would like him to be, hopefully a Loki. He's a little mischievous, but at the end of the day, you can count on him to help save the day. And it'll be interesting to see what kind of balance they have in the Shazam movie between Shazam and Black Adam. Whose origin story is it going to be? Who will be the primary character? And how can you develop two characters, a tandem? I think everyone can agree that Chris Hemsworth's Thor has suffered a little bit from the amount of attention paid to Loki. So Dwayne Johnson said that he was very excited to play an anti-hero, and he said it's important to remember that Black Adam starts out as a slave and gets these powers, and at first is very aggressive with them because he has a lot of anger in him. But then he says there's tragedy that strikes, which causes Black Adam to rethink his priorities and how he wants to use his powers. Now, I like that they're honoring the slave origins of the character, but Black Adam was a villain for a lot longer than he's been an anti-hero. And I think that all that history that he has as a villain made the transition to an anti-hero more potent and powerful and more moving. But I think if right away Dwayne Johnson's like, look, I might be evil for 20 minutes, but don't worry, I'm going to be good by the end of the movie. I think that takes a little bit away from the character arc and development of Black Adam, and one of the reasons I think he's such a popular character today. But then also the other thing that makes me concerned is the little movie called Hercules. I was so excited for Hercules. I thought the trailers looked fantastic. I thought this was going to be a really big movie, not just for Dwayne Johnson, but for Greek mythology, and it was just going to be a huge fun experience. But then it was like a total dud. It was horrible. It was like a bad Saturday morning cartoon come to life in live action. It was just such a disappointment, and I think largely because The Rock just couldn't hold the movie up on his own. Which is interesting because Hercules is supposed to be capable of such amazing feats of strength. But I do really wonder about Dwayne Johnson as a leading actor. I think he's very good, in the Fast and Furious films when he utilized his size and his ability to crack some great jokes. But particularly with a serious role, I just really wonder if he can pull off Black Adam, a character that's supposed to be very multifaceted. And such an emotional arc that he describes, going from slave to villain to anti-hero. That's a tall order, and I just don't know if Dwayne Johnson is capable of it. So I'm curious, what do you think? Do you have a lot of faith in Dwayne Johnson as as Black Adam in the Shazam movie? Or do you think, I think, as I said, he would have made a much better Shazam. I think he has a boy-like, glee to him that I think would do a great job of reflecting the fact that Shazam is just Billy Batson in adult form, but he's still very much a kid on the inside. And also because Dwayne Johnson's a fantastic comedian, a much better comedian than he is a dramatic actor. So are you on board with me that maybe this is going to be a little iffy? Or are you like, Grace, why are you always dissing DC? You have no faith. I have total faith in Dwayne Johnson as Shazam. As Black Adam and Shazam. Nothing you've said here has swayed me. All right, so those are the 3 stories of the day. Whew, found 3 stories. As I said, it was tough today, but I'm very proud of the way the episode took shape, and I hope you enjoyed it. But as I said, there's still a viewer question to go. And this comes from David Hamner. And David says, hey Grace, question. With so much talk about franchises, specifically for comic book movies, do you think people are at risk of wasting all their excitement on movies before they are released? We've been talking quite a bit lately about X-Men Apocalypse and Civil War, and like everyone else, I'm extremely excited for them, but it's almost made me forget that Avengers 2 is coming out in just a few months. And even then, I feel like with the whole Marvel timeline planned out, and with so much talk of every rumor and announcement, viewers basically know the majority of what's going to happen in the Avengers 2. Well, that's Marvel's job to make sure that you don't. But then David continues saying, I'll still be there opening night. That's also why Marvel, I think, can get away with this, because they know you're going to be there. Me too, though. It says, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on the possible downsides of spending so much time anticipating movies that won't be released for years. Well, David, I think on a cheeky note, the first thing I have to say is that thank goodness we have all this excitement before a film, because sometimes that's all the excitement we get. Because so often these days when the movie finally arrives, it doesn't deliver. Like Hercules. I got to at least enjoy the hype about Hercules, even though I couldn't enjoy the movie itself. And, I still remember that period of hype fondly. It was a lot of fun. We had a good time discussing it, and that was a really great trailer. Actually, 2 trailers were very, very good. But yes, the game in Hollywood has changed in terms of publicity, largely because of the comic book craze. And that's because these movies are planned out so far in advance. You have Marvel movies planned out all the way through, like 2019, basically. And I think that that has created a situation where there's so much looking forward that it's really hard. It is hard to pay attention to the here and now. And that's something that Disney has to balance out. Again, as I've said, you've seen a real lack of Star Wars promotion. They had that teaser, but I really do strongly believe they're going to wait to really full-on promote Star Wars until after the Avengers 2 comes out. There's enough time to do it that way. Avengers comes out at the beginning of the summer, and because Star Wars is a holiday release, that would give them the entire summer post Avengers 2 to promote poor Ant-Man, to promote Star Wars Episode 7. And I think that that's a situation where you do see Disney trying to balance out their big properties and make sure they don't overshadow each other. Because while you're talking Civil War, at least you're still talking Marvel. And so when Avengers 2 does come out, and and trust me, they will make sure you know that it's out, you'll be like, oh yeah, well I'm so excited for Civil War, I better go see Avengers 2, or else I won't know what's going on in Civil War, because these movies are so interconnected. Also, a long time ago, before the comic book craze, movies, a trilogy was unusual. Movies were one and done. So there wasn't anything to talk about in the future. But now there is. And again, as I just said, there's these other experiences, fan experiences with Broadway and cruise lines and races and marathons that, people are more excited, I think, these days about franchises than they are individual movies. Even Disney Animation, like let's say, is a brand itself. And I think Disney Animation will probably be releasing Frozen 2 in theaters. Very interesting development for the studio. So that's just, you have to remember that Hollywood is in the business of supplying what audiences want. I think that they do try and sway audiences a little bit, but, it's the basic commercial rule of supply and demand. While maybe some studio executives go, man, I wish when we talked about a movie when it opened, they'd be like, well, while I wish that, I can't force it on people. People want to talk about the movie that's further down the line. And as I said, even when you're interviewing an actor for a movie that they're doing right now, you also want to ask them about the other movie, because I think it's important to. That's part of the conversation we're having right now. And that's something that people are interested in. And I think people do look at the long-term trajectory, not just of a franchise, but also of an actor now. I think that's also very interesting. But do I think it's harmful? I don't think that it is. I think that this is the trump card that movies has right now over television. Although people do talk about television long term as well. But television is something you largely experience on your own. It's also something that you experience now at your own pace thanks to DVRing. Also the rise of the popularity of Netflix and the way they dump a season, and everybody experiences it differently. And that creates actually more of an independent experience. That does a favor for movies, whereas just like a movie opens, an episode airs. So I think this is the trump card that movies have right now, that they can at least engage audiences this way. It can't be week to week with an episode, but they can engage them mentally with the promise of another movie. And as I've said before, I think Marvel is turning their movies into almost giant episodes that come out not every week, but every couple of months. So I don't think it's a problem. And again, as I said, I think it works out because you're talking Civil War, you will see Avengers too. But I'm curious to what you guys think. This is the way the news is consumed, so you must not have too much of a problem with it. Or is it like something like you hate yourself in the morning after you wake up, even though you've had so much fun? I think it's an interesting question, and I think it is worth noting because it has had such a big change on not just the way movies are covered, but the movies that are made. Finally, I will say, though, that I think the one point that it does hurt a movie is when they delay the release date. They have to push it back. I think that makes people have doubts about the quality of the film. For instance, and also I think it can create a little bit of bad will. My example that I want to use is that while people were very excited about the Sony Spider-Man Marvel deal, they were very disappointed to see that this meant that Black Panther and Captain Marvel would be pushed back, because not only are those hotly anticipated movies, but they're adding some diversity to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, both with a black lead superhero and a female lead superhero anchoring their own movies. And to make viewers wait a whole nother year for both those properties, successive years, but an additional year for each property, I think that was a little bit of a hit that Marvel took with their fans, and we'll see how it, once the dust settles from the Sony Marvel Spider-Man deal, if that rears its head again and there's any anger about that. All right, so that's today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and the viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered on Monday, and any questions that you might have. Oh, actually, there will be no morning movie news on Monday because it's a holiday weekend, but there will be, of course, on Tuesday. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.